Where did Christ Mass, otherwise known as Christmas, come from? It did not begin at the birth of Christ. It began much earlier. The December 25th celebration had nothing to do with his birth or Christ at all. The first Christmas night is the first inconsistency. In Luke chapter 2 and 8, it says, "And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night." When was Jesus born? It is well known among biblical scholars that Jesus was not born in December because shepherds were never out in the field with their sheep at that time. So the land of Israel has two major climates, which is called the wet season and the dry season. The dry season would be the seasons of spring and summer, and the wet season would be the season of fall and winter. So if it says that shepherds were abiding in the field, watching their flock by night at the birth of Jesus or Yeshua, then we know that this would not have been December, because shepherds would not have been grazing at that time period. Shepherds always brought their sheep in from the mountainsides and field and corralled them not later than October 15th to protect them from the cold, rainy season that followed. This is documented. In ancient Israel, shepherds always brought their sheep in from the mountainsides. This still happens right now, by the way, and field and corralled them not later than October 15th to protect them from the cold, rainy season that followed. So if shepherds were grazing in the field at the time of his birth, common sense, this is far removed from December. It was an ancient custom among Jews of those days to send out their sheep to the fields in their deserts about the Passover early spring and bring them home at commencement of the first rain. During the time they were out, the shepherds watched them night and day. As October ended, the sheep were brought in because of the cold and the first rains of winter. We find that the sheep were kept out in the open country during the whole summer. That's when shepherds would have been grazing in the field overnight during the dry season, summer, not winter. So there's already a problematic, issue with the purported birth of Jesus at December 25th. And as these shepherds had not yet brought home their flock when Christ was born in Bethlehem, it is a presumptive argument that October have not yet commenced, and that consequently he was not born on the 25th of December, when no flock were out in the field, nor could have been born later than October, as the flocks were still in fields by night. On this very ground, the nativity in December should be given up. You got to drop that. It's impossible to claim that the historical Yeshua would have been born in December. It contradicts the culture of the day and the practice of the day. Shepherds brought their sheep in back inside by the latest October 15th. This is still a practice in Israel today. Still a practice in Israel today. It gets cold in Israel as we go into the late months of October, November, and especially December. So shepherds would bring their flocks in as they do now. So again, when the Bible says that shepherds were grazing in the field at night during the birth of Yeshua, this could not have been December. It means he would have had either a spring or summer birth, but certainly not a late fall or winter birth. The census of Caesar Augustus is mentioned in Luke chapters 2, verses 1 through 2. But historians are not certain when it was issued. But it is improbable that he would call for the citizens of the Roman Empire to return to their native homes to be enrolled in the census in the middle of winter. Even his own armies avoided marching during the hazards of winter weather. This is the other issue that's problematic, because in the story, There's a census going on. In the story of Jesus' birth or Yeshua's birth, there's a census that's taking place just before he's being born, where the Emperor Caesar Augustus is actually ordering his troops to return home. He would not have been having them travel in winter. That's another problematic issue that people overlook because of our era, where we have airplanes and cars, where you could travel in comfort. You could be in the airplane and be in heated seats today. You could be in a car and be in heated seats. But for the ancient world, there wasn't too much travel when it was cold. So if this national census brought everyone back to their ancestral home, then this meant that a lot of people were on their way to vigorous travel in the deep of winter at that time in history? I think not. Many authorities believe that Christ was born in the spring of the year, but in the wisdom, the date of Christ's birth has been hidden from us. Why does all the world celebrate the birth of Christ not merely in December, but on a certain day in December? Why then does all the world celebrate the birth of Christ not merely in December, but on a certain day in December? Where did that come from? Because nowhere in the New Testament account does it give an actual day. What's the oral tradition on that? What does the written record say? What is Christ Mass? How did Christ Mass get into the Christian church? Why did it enter back in those early days? These are just some things to think about. Christmas was not among the earliest festivals of the church. Now, this is very deep. I want you guys to really pay attention to this part of the dialogue. The first evidence of this feast is from Egypt. Listen to me carefully. The first evidence of a celebration of a concept of Christmas, not necessarily under the name Christmas, is in Egypt, the center of idolatry and pagan worship of the day. Pagan customs centering around the January calendar, which is the pagan calendar, gravitated to Christmas. And that's a citation from the Catholic Encyclopedia, 1911 edition. Christmas. Origen, an early church writer, said this about celebrating birthdays in the Bible. In the scriptures, no one is recorded to have kept the feast or held a great banquet on the birthday of Jesus. It is only sinners like Pharaoh or Herod, and by Pharaoh, we're talking about the Greco-Roman pharaohs of the Ptolemaic Empire, because this period of Egypt, you don't have native Egyptians on the throne, you have the Ptolemaic Empire on the throne. So Origen says it is only sinners like Pharaoh or Herod who make great rejoicing over that day in which they were born into this world. And this is a quote from Origen, again, Catholic Encyclopedia, this time the 11th edition, entitled Natal Day. It was after AD 354, Common Era, that Christmas was celebrated on December 25th. Time out. It wasn't until 354 AD / Common Era that Christmas was celebrated on December 25th. And that citation comes to us from the World Book Encyclopedia. After AD 354, Jesus' disciples and apostles never kept Christmas. So if the early followers of Yeshua or Jesus didn't keep Christmas, instead, they kept all of the holy days of Torah, then anyone who considers themselves a practitioner of the teachings of the New Testament, you should not be following any holiday centered around the birth of Yeshua or the birth of Jesus, because none of the original apostles nor disciples celebrated that.